The sound of ceramic shattering against the hardwood floor echoed through the Santos family home like a gunshot in the pre-dawn darkness. Maria Santos stood trembling in her bedroom doorway, staring at the fragments of her beloved Virgin Mary statue scattered across the floor, the same statue that had been blessed by 3 different priests and had watched over her family's prayers for nearly 2 decades. Just hours earlier, Maria had received the devastating news that would change everything. Her 3rd pregnancy, the one she had prayed for with such desperate hope after 2 previous losses, had ended in another miscarriage. The doctor's gentle voice still rang in her ears. "I'm so sorry, Maria. Sometimes these things just happen." But for Maria, this wasn't just another tragedy. It felt like a betrayal from the very heaven she had served so faithfully. "Where were you?" she had whispered to the statue through her tears, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Where were you when I needed you most?" The rage that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a fury so consuming that it propelled her across the room before she could stop herself. Now, looking at the destruction she had caused, Maria felt something die inside her chest. Not just hope, but the faith that had anchored her entire life. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and share just one word that describes what faith means to you in your darkest moments. The broken pieces seemed to accuse her from the floor. The Virgin's face, cracked down the middle but still recognizable, appeared to be gazing up at her with those painted eyes that had once brought such comfort. Maria's mother would be heartbroken when she discovered what had happened. The elderly woman had gifted this statue to Maria on her wedding day, calling it their family's guardian of mercy. How could she explain that mercy felt like nothing more than a cruel myth? But as Maria knelt among the fragments, something caught her eye. The statue had broken in a way that seemed almost impossible. The hands, once folded in prayer, had separated cleanly from the body and now lay palm up beside the head, as if still offering a blessing even in destruction. A shiver ran down Maria's spine as she noticed that not a single piece had rolled under the bed or dresser. Every fragment remained in a perfect circle around where she knelt. Her 7-year-old daughter Elena's voice drifted from down the hallway. "Mama, why are you crying?" The innocent question pierced through Maria's grief like a knife. How could she tell her child that she no longer believed in the prayers they said together each night? How could she admit that the Virgin Mary they sang to before bed might be nothing more than painted plaster and childhood stories? As dawn began to creep through her bedroom window, casting long shadows across the broken statue, Maria had no idea that within hours, something would begin to unfold that would challenge everything she thought she knew about answered prayers. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the most profound miracles begin in our moments of deepest doubt. Maria Santos had once been the spiritual anchor of her 3-generation household. The woman whose gentle voice would call her family to evening prayer as surely as the church bells called the neighborhood to Mass. Every morning at 6, she would light the candles on her bedroom altar, while her elderly mother, Esperanza, shuffled in with her worn rosary beads. By 6:15, little Elena would appear in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes as she knelt between the 2 women who had shaped her understanding of faith. Those sacred morning moments had sustained their family through everything. Maria's father's death 5 years ago, her husband Carlos's job loss during the pandemic, even Elena's frightening bout with pneumonia last winter. According to Maria, the Virgin Mary had never failed to provide exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. Their little altar had become a beacon of hope, not just for their household, but for neighbors who would quietly slip prayer requests under their door, trusting that Maria's intercessions carried special weight in heaven. But 3 months ago, when Maria had begun praying for a successful pregnancy with an intensity that bordered on desperation, something had shifted. The familiar peace she usually felt during prayer was replaced by an anxious pleading that left her exhausted. She increased their family rosaries from once to twice daily. She added novenas, lit extra candles, even made a pilgrimage to the shrine 30 miles away. The more fervently she prayed, the more distant heaven seemed to become. Now, 3 days after her explosive moment of rage, the broken statue pieces still lay scattered across her bedroom floor like a ceramic accusation. Maria had locked her bedroom door and refused to let anyone in, not even Elena, who pressed worried little notes under the gap asking if Mama was sick. Her mother's gentle knocking and whispered rosaries outside her door had gone unanswered. The altar candles had burned down to nothing, their wax pooling on the wooden surface in hardened tears. Carlos had tried to reason with her. Mi amor, grief makes people do things they don't mean. We can replace the statue. What matters is that we still have each other. But Maria knew he didn't understand. This wasn't about replacing anything. It was about the devastating realization that everything she had built her life around might be an elaborate illusion. How could she face her mother's trusting eyes and admit that she no longer believed? How could she lead Elena in prayers that felt like lies? The house had fallen into an unnatural silence. Esperanza still prayed her morning rosary alone in the kitchen, but her voice carried a tremor of confusion. Elena had stopped asking when Mama would come out and instead drew pictures that she slipped under the bedroom door, crayon drawings of angels with broken wings and flowers growing from cracked ground. On this fourth morning, as pale sunlight filtered through Maria's bedroom curtains, she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, unaware that her 7-year-old daughter was about to make a discovery downstairs that would change everything. Because sometimes, according to those who witnessed what happened next, the most profound answers come not through our prayers, but through the innocent faith of a child who refuses to stop believing. What Elena found in their garden that morning would force Maria to question whether her rage had truly ended their family's connection to grace, or if something far more mysterious was just beginning. Elena's bare feet made soft pattering sounds on the kitchen tiles as she crept downstairs in the early morning light, careful not to wake anyone. For 3 days, their elderly cat Mimi had been missing, and Elena's 7-year-old heart was breaking with worry. Mimi wasn't just any cat. She was diabetic and needed her insulin injection every 12 hours, a routine that had become as sacred as their family prayers. Without her medication, the veterinarian had warned them, Mimi might not survive more than 48 hours. Eleanor had searched everywhere, under the porch, in the garage, even in the neighbors' yards, despite her mother's strict rules about staying close to home. Last night, she had whispered desperate prayers into her pillow, begging the Virgin Mary to bring Mimi home safely. Please don't let Mama lose Mimi too, she had pleaded, somehow understanding that her mother's heart couldn't handle another loss right now. As Elena pushed open the back door to search the garden one more time, she stopped dead in her tracks. There, sitting perfectly still beneath her grandmother's rose bushes, was Mimi, calm, alert, and apparently unharmed. But what made Elena's breath catch wasn't just finding her beloved pet. It was where Mimi was sitting and what surrounded her. The cat was positioned in a perfect circle of white rose petals that had fallen during the night, despite the fact that Esperanza's roses hadn't bloomed in over a month. The petals formed an almost geometric pattern around Mimi, as if arranged by careful hands rather than scattered by wind. Elena blinked hard, wondering if she was still dreaming, but the scene remained unchanged. Mimi, Elena whispered, and the cat turned toward her with bright, healthy eyes. According to the family's veterinarian, a diabetic cat missing her insulin for 60 hours should have been lethargic, possibly unconscious or worse. But Mimi looked exactly as she had 3 days ago, alert, groomed, and purring softly as she stretched in the morning sun. Elena scooped up her pet, feeling Mimi's warm, steady heartbeat against her chest. The cat's fur was clean and soft, showing no signs of having spent days outdoors. Her nose was cool and wet, her breathing normal. It was as if Mimi had been carefully tended by invisible hands during her absence, protected from harm in ways that defied medical explanation. Racing upstairs with Mimi in her arms, Elena burst through the kitchen where her grandmother Esperanza was preparing breakfast. The elderly woman's rosary beads clattered to the floor as she saw the miracle of Mimi's return. "Dios mío!" she gasped, crossing herself rapidly. "Where has she been, mi niña?" But Elena's attention was drawn to something else entirely. Through the kitchen window, she could see into her mother's bedroom, where Maria still lay motionless on her bed. The broken statue pieces were clearly visible on the floor, but something had changed. The fragments were no longer scattered randomly. They had somehow formed a neat pile, as if gathered by gentle hands during the night. Elena's innocent voice carried through the house as she announced Mimi's return. But what she couldn't know was that this was only the first of several impossible coincidences that would soon force everyone in the Santos family to question what was really happening. Could Mimi's mysterious survival be simple luck, or was something far more protective watching over their household during its darkest hour? The sound of Elena's joyful announcement about Mimi's return drifted through Maria's locked bedroom door, but she remained motionless on her bed, staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes. 3 days of isolation had left her feeling disconnected from everything. Her family's relief, their whispered conversations, even their attempts to coax her out with offers of her favorite meals. The world outside her room seemed to exist in a different dimension, one where hope still made sense. But at precisely 10:47 a.m., everything changed with a single sharp cry from the kitchen. "Ay, Dios mío!" Esperanza's voice carried a note of pain that cut through Maria's numbness like a blade. The sound of something heavy hitting the kitchen floor was followed by Elena's frightened sobs. "Mama! Mama! Something's wrong with Abuela!" Maria's maternal instincts overrode her grief in an instant. She bolted from her bed, fumbling with the door lock, and raced downstairs to find her 78-year-old mother clutching her chest, her face pale and drawn with pain. Esperanza had collapsed into a kitchen chair, her breathing shallow and rapid, while Elena stood frozen nearby, still holding Mimi. "Call 911!" Maria commanded Carlos, who had rushed in from the garage. Her hands shook as she knelt beside her mother, feeling for a pulse that seemed too fast and irregular. Esperanza's eyes were wide with fear, and she kept trying to speak, but couldn't catch her breath. "Don't try to talk, Mama," Maria whispered, surprised by how naturally the prayer words came. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, please don't take her from us too." Carlos hung up the phone with confusion creasing his brow. "That's strange," he said. "The dispatcher said they already have a unit en route to our address. Something about a medical emergency call that came in 15 minutes ago, but nobody here called them." Within minutes, the distinctive wail of sirens filled their quiet neighborhood. The paramedics burst through their front door with professional efficiency, immediately assessing Esperanza's condition with practiced hands and gentle questions. According to the lead medic, they had received an emergency call about a cardiac episode at their exact address. But when they tried to call back for more details, the line had gone dead. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. The timing was perfect, the paramedic later told Maria as they loaded Esperanza into the ambulance. Another 10 minutes and this could have been much more serious. Someone definitely looked out for your mother today. Esperanza's condition had stabilized quickly with oxygen and medication, but she would need to spend the night in the hospital for observation. As Maria climbed into the ambulance beside her mother, she found herself gripping Esperanza's weathered hand while the older woman whispered weakly, "The Virgin Mary." "She called them for me, mija. I felt her presence right before the pain started." Maria wanted to dismiss these words as the confused ramblings of a woman in medical distress, but the coincidences were becoming harder to ignore. The mystery of who had called 911 would never be solved. The dispatcher's logs showed the call, but the number was listed as unknown, and no recording existed of the conversation. Was Maria's family experiencing a series of impossible coincidences, or was something far more intentional guiding these perfectly timed interventions? In the sterile quiet of St. Joseph's Hospital cardiac wing, Maria sat beside her mother's bed while monitoring machines beeped softly. The doctors had assured them the episode was mild, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted. For the first time since destroying the statue, she had prayed instinctively, desperately. Esperanza slept peacefully under mild sedatives, breathing steady, but even in sleep, her fingers clutched something against her chest. Maria gently lifted her mother's hand and discovered rosary beads, worn smooth by decades of prayers. These weren't the beads Esperanza usually carried. Those had been left at home. "She asked me to give those to someone here," a soft voice said from the doorway. Maria looked up to see an elderly volunteer in a blue smock. "I was visiting the 3rd floor when I felt called to bring these down here. She seemed to know exactly which room." Maria's heart raced as she examined the rosary. The beads were distinctive deep blue glass, each containing tiny white flowers suspended inside. She had seen these exact beads only once before. They were identical to the ones wrapped around her broken Virgin Mary statue, the same ones that had shattered when she threw it to the floor. "Where did you get these?" Maria asked, her voice barely a whisper. The volunteer looked confused, as if trying to remember hazy details. "A woman asked me to deliver them," she said slowly. "She was in the chapel about an hour ago, praying alone, dark hair, probably your age, wearing a light blue dress. She said someone in the cardiac wing needed these tonight, and she described this room perfectly, even knew your mother's name was Esperanza. But when I went back," the volunteer paused, genuinely puzzled. "I couldn't find her anywhere. The chapel attendant said no one had been there for over 2 hours." Maria's hands trembled as she held the rosary up to the fluorescent lighting. They were exactly like her grandmother's set, the ones her great-grandmother had brought from Mexico in 1943, blessed at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. These particular beads had been crafted by nuns who embedded real rose petals inside the glass, creating tiny white flowers frozen in blue crystal. But Maria's great-grandmother's rosary had been lost in a house fire 20 years ago. The family had mourned its destruction almost as deeply as they had mourned losing their childhood home. No other rosary like it had ever been found. As if sensing Maria's shock, Esperanza stirred and whispered something that made Maria's blood run cold. "She said you would understand the roses, Mija. She said broken things can still hold beauty." The volunteer quietly excused herself, but Maria barely noticed. She sat staring at the impossible rosary, remembering how the statue pieces had mysteriously gathered themselves, how Mimi had been surrounded by white rose petals that shouldn't have existed, how a mysterious 911 call had saved her mother's life. Were these escalating coincidences trying to tell her something she was too afraid to hear? When Maria and Esperanza returned home from the hospital the next morning, they found Carlos in the kitchen, making breakfast with an unusual brightness in his eyes. "You're not going to believe this," he said, setting down his coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. "Miguel called about an hour ago. He wants to come home." Miguel was Maria's 19-year-old nephew, Esperanza's grandson, who had been estranged from the family for nearly 2 years. His struggle with addiction had created a chasm of hurt and broken trust that seemed impossible to bridge. The last time they had seen him, he had stolen Esperanza's prescription medications and disappeared into the night, leaving behind only angry words and devastated hearts. "He sounded different," Carlos continued, his voice filled with cautious hope. "Clean, sober. He said he's been in a recovery program in Phoenix for 8 months, and something happened yesterday that made him realize he needed to call home. He wouldn't say what exactly, just that he felt." guided to reach out to his family. Maria sank into a kitchen chair, still clutching the mysterious rosary beads from the hospital. The timing felt impossible. Miguel's call had come at the exact moment she had been kneeling among her broken statue pieces for the first time since her moment of rage, finally allowing herself to feel something other than anger. According to Carlos, Miguel had specifically asked about Abuela's health, even though no one had told him about Esperanza's cardiac episode. "There's more," Carlos said gently. "He's been clean for 8 months, Maria. 8 months. That means he got sober right around the time you—" He gestured toward her bedroom, unable to finish the sentence. "Right around the time everything started falling apart for us." Elena burst through the back door at that moment, her school backpack still strapped to her shoulders, her face glowing with excitement. "Mama, there's a lady in our garden who knows my name. She said to tell you that the roses remember everything." Maria's blood turned to ice. "What lady, mi amor? What does she look like?" "She's pretty, like the lady on our prayers. She has dark hair and a blue dress, and she's standing by Abuela's rose bushes. But when I tried to get closer, she smiled and pointed to the house, like she wanted me to come tell you something important." Carlos was already moving toward the back door, but Elena caught his hand. "Papa, you can't see her, only I can, but she left something for Mama." Elena reached into her backpack and pulled out a single white rose, perfect, fresh, and somehow glowing with an inner light, despite the fact that Esperanza's rose bushes hadn't bloomed in over a month. As Maria held the impossible flower, she noticed that one of its petals was broken, hanging by the thinnest thread, yet still beautiful in its imperfection. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Sometimes the most profound beauty came not despite brokenness, but because of it. Miguel's voice crackled through Carlos's phone as he called back, "Tell Abuela, I had a dream about her last night. I dreamed she was hurt, but angels were taking care of her. Is she okay?" How could coincidences this precise continue to unfold? Or was Maria's family being drawn back together by something far more intentional than chance? At 2:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, the Santos family was awakened by the acrid smell of smoke and the urgent shriek of their fire alarm. Carlos bolted upright in bed, immediately alert to the danger, while Maria grabbed Elena from her room as thick grey smoke began seeping under doorframes throughout their house. "Get outside, now!" Carlos shouted, but as they reached the front hallway, they discovered their worst nightmare. The living room was already engulfed in flames that blocked their main exit. The fire had started in the electrical panel near the front door, according to the fire chief's later investigation, spreading with terrifying speed through the old house's dry wooden framework. Within minutes, the Santos family found themselves trapped in the back hallway, with smoke filling their lungs and heat becoming unbearable. Esperanza, still weakened from her cardiac episode, struggled to move quickly, while Elena clung to her mother in terror. "The back bedroom window!" Carlos gasped, pointing toward Maria's room. The same room where the broken Virgin Mary statue pieces still lay on the floor. It was their only escape route, but to reach it, they would have to pass directly through the area where the smoke was thickest. "Stay low," he instructed his family. But as they crawled toward Maria's bedroom door, something extraordinary began to happen. The smoke seemed to part before them, like a curtain being drawn back. Where the hallway should have been filled with choking grey clouds, a clear path appeared, not completely smoke-free, but breathable, as if an invisible presence was creating a protective corridor for their escape. Elena later described it as walking through a tunnel made of clean air, while Esperanza whispered prayers with each breath she was somehow able to take. But the most shocking discovery awaited them inside Maria's bedroom. While flames had consumed every other room they passed, Maria's bedroom remained completely untouched, not just unburned, but without even a hint of smoke damage. The air inside was fresh and cool, as if the fire existed in a different world entirely. The broken statue pieces lay exactly where Maria had left them, arranged in their mysterious neat pile, completely pristine. Carlos pushed open the bedroom window and helped his family climb to safety, while sirens wailed in the distance. From the safety of their neighbor's yard, they watched in stunned silence as firefighters battled the blaze that consumed most of their home. When Fire Chief Rodriguez approached them later, his expression was one of professional confusion mixed with something approaching awe. "I've been fighting fires for 23 years, he told the Santos family, "and I've never seen damage patterns like this. The fire burned completely around your bedroom. We're talking about flames that reached nearly 1800 degrees on 3 sides of that room, but somehow never crossed the threshold. There's no scientific explanation for how that's possible. The doorframe itself should have ignited." As dawn broke over their devastated neighborhood, Maria stood among the ashes of her former life, holding Eleanor close while staring at the one room that had been preserved. Her bedroom window was visible through the burned shell of their house, its glass unbroken, its curtains still hanging peacefully. How could fire consume everything except the exact space where her broken faith had been tested? 6 months later, Maria knelt in her rebuilt bedroom, carefully arranging white roses around a small altar she had created in the exact spot where her Virgin Mary statue had once shattered. The statue itself had been lovingly repaired, its visible cracks now filled with gold in the ancient Japanese tradition of kintsugi, the art of making broken things more beautiful than they were before. Each golden seam told a story of healing, transformation, and grace discovered in the midst of despair. The Santos family had moved back into their reconstructed home just 3 weeks ago, but Maria's bedroom had been the first room they restored. According to the insurance investigators, it remained the only space that required no repairs whatsoever, not even a fresh coat of paint. The contractor had marveled at finding the room in pristine condition, down to a thin layer of dust that spelled out what looked like peace across the windowsill. Miguel had returned home 2 months after the fire, clean and sober for over a year. The reunion with Esperanza had been tearful and transformative, with both grandmother and grandson acknowledging that their separation had led them each toward healing they might never have found otherwise. Miguel now worked at a local recovery center, helping other young people find their way back to hope. His first words upon seeing the rebuilt altar were, "Tia, she was always watching over us, wasn't she, even when we couldn't feel her." Eleanor had grown into a thoughtful 8-year-old who spoke with wisdom beyond her years about the lady in the garden. She no longer reported seeing the mysterious figure in blue, but she had developed a habit of leaving fresh flowers by Esperanza's rose bushes every morning, whispering thanks for keeping our family safe when everything was scary. The roses now bloomed year-round, defying seasonal logic in a way that made botanists scratch their heads and neighbors cross themselves in quiet wonder. Maria's own transformation ran deeper than the visible changes in their home. She had learned to pray with open hands rather than clenched fists, offering gratitude for mysteries she might never fully understand, rather than demanding answers to questions that perhaps weren't meant to be solved. The rosary beads from the hospital remained her constant companion, each blue bead a reminder that sometimes the most profound gifts come disguised as impossible coincidences. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. In the comments below, type "Blessed Brokenness" if this story reminded you that our most painful moments can become doorways to grace, creating a prayer chain of hope for everyone who needs to remember that they are never truly alone. But the deepest mystery remained Elena's quiet insistence that the lady still visited their garden, especially during family moments of joy or sorrow. Last week, during Miguel's 1-year sobriety celebration, Elena had matter-of-factly announced that she's proud of our cousin, before anyone else noticed the single white rose petal that had somehow appeared on Miguel's empty plate. Some questions, Maria had learned, weren't meant to be answered, but cherished, gentle reminders that love works in ways that transcend human understanding. turning our broken places into sources of light for others who need to believe that miracles, however quiet, are always possible.